Hi guys! In this video we're going to look at what exercises you should be doing for gluteal tendinopathy. But to understand what exercises works and which ones you should avoid, you need to first understand what happens in the tendons when they get injured so that you understand how the exercise fixes them. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maryke. I'm one of the physiotherapists from sportsinjuryphysio.com, where you can get online physiotherapy assessment as well as treatment for your injuries. Have a look at the description of this video if you want a link to our website. Good. So what is gluteal tendinopathy and what happens when you get it? So gluteal tendinopathy is something that affects the tendons of your gluteal muscles, which are the glute min, glute med, glute max. It can be any one of those three, or a combination of the three is quite common as well. Most often it will be glute med that's affected. Now, it goes under several names. Some people just talk about lateral hip pain, pain over the outside of the hip, gluteal pain, greater trochanteric pain syndrome is a scientific name they're starting to use for it. It can also be in combination with a bursitis, but we've done videos on all of those and I'll link to them in the description of this video. So if we think of why it develops, it's an overuse injury. Now, whenever we do activities or exercise like walking, gardening, anything that uses the hips, running, jumping, our body sustains micro damage. Now, this micro damage is normal and it's part of the process of how we grow stronger over time. So you'll do your bout of exercise, the body repairs it, and then you're stronger for the next session. Now, if you don't allow your body enough recovery time between sessions, this micro damage accumulates, and then that can cause micro damage or a proper injury. Also, if the bout of activity is a lot more than what you used to, you can actually overload the tendon in that one session. So say for instance, you haven't really trained for a marathon and you decide, I'll just give it a go, and you run it. It may be that actually it's just too much for the tendons to handle, and that can cause the injury. So as soon as the tendon is injured, it loses some of its strength. So now it doesn't have the capacity to cope with all the normal activities that you used to do. So you may find that even things that you never had an issue with, like walking to the shops, suddenly makes it hurt. And that's because it's lost some of its strength. So the way to get this condition better is a combination of relative rest, which will allow it to calm down, and strength training, because you've got to restore the strength that's missing. Now, relative rest is a really important component, and that's why we start all our online treatments that we do with a good in-depth conversation with our patients, that we understand what activities they do. It's your gardening, your walking, your running, everything you do in the day that counts towards your total load in a day. And that has to be adjusted to a level that doesn't aggravate your pain. And that's what relative rest is. It means that you don't have to rest fully, but you have to reduce all your activities to a level that doesn't make it hurt more. Otherwise, it won't calm down. Now, this video is going to be only about the second component, the exercise today. And I'll talk about what exercises to avoid, why to avoid them, and which ones to do. Also, on that note, you may find that people do massage for this, they do acupuncture for it, ultrasound, all sorts of things. All of those things are useful because they can help bring the pain down a bit, but it's a temporary measure to bring the pain down, and it can help you do your rehab and things, for instance, if it's really painful to start. But it's not the thing that's going to fix it in the long run. So you can do massage and things in combination with your strength training, but you can't leave the strength training out. Good. So let's talk about exercises to avoid first of all. Now, in the olden days, before we did a lot of research, we used to think that it's overly tight gluteal muscles that causes this injury. And all you had to do is stretch them out so there's more flexibility, and that will fix the problem. But now we know that no, that's not actually the case. The tightness and the stiffness you feel in that area is because the tendons are injured and they irritate the muscles, so everything feels tight and sore. If you go and stretch those tendons with the typical glute stretches, bringing the legs across, all of that sort of thing, you end up just irritating the tendon more. Now, Alison has done a full video about stretches, demonstrating a few versions of them, but it's all your glute stretches, your TFL stretches, your ITB stretches, All of those things have the potential to irritate this condition. So have a look at her video if you want to know more about that. But if you're doing any of those, stop them, because you'll be amazed at how much better it feels a few weeks later. Okay, so that's the first tip. So let's get on to strength training. Now, there are plenty of different exercises you can do for strengthening your glutes, and not all of them will be appropriate for you. So it's important to work with somebody who can help you make the decision which ones are the best for you. But I'm going to try and give you some guidelines today. So the first thing we've got to think about is how sensitive is your tendon? Because if it's super sensitive and it's easy to irritate it, and you can't do much activity, then you likely want to start with really light exercises and exercises that does not take the muscle and the tendons into a position where they're going to be stretched. So let's give you an example of what I mean with that. One of the basic exercises that gets prescribed for this condition are side leg lifts. Now, they are brilliant because they do work the glute med specifically as well. But can you see, if I'm going to allow my leg to drop all the way down behind them, that's going to take my leg into a position, if I lie flat especially, where my glute tendons are more stretched. And that can often irritate them. So what we tend to do is place a pile of cushions at the bottom of our patient's legs. So we tell them to just pile it up so that when you do this exercise, you never want to go below level with your leg. The second bit with that is that it's often less aggravating to do isometric exercises where you just hold the position. So you lift it off the pile of cushions and you just hold it and then you relax again, rather than going up, down, up, down. Those are called isotonics. So if you have a super sensitive tendon, you want to start with isometric holds first. Let me just get this proper up. There we go. Now, isometric holds can be done in several ways as well. And usually you want to start with shorter holds first and more repetitions. So roughly 10-second hold, 10-second rest, do a few repetitions. And the number of reps you do will depend again on the tolerance of your tendon. So the other problem with this is that a tendon often doesn't tell you in the moment that you're overdoing it. It'll be several hours later that you get your pain. So it's always best to test a small lot of something and then check how it responds to it in the 24 hours after, and then decide where to go from there. But you can't just stay on the easy isometrics. You want to progress and strengthen it over time. So you have to lengthen the time you hold them for. Of course, then the rest periods have to lengthen as well. When you get to a certain number of or hold times for the isometrics, it's time to either add load to it, so make them heavier to hold, or switch them up and start with ones where you actually start lifting. But again, for our patients who have a really sensitive tendon, we tend to keep the pile there, while they do the lift. So we're still avoiding that stretch range at the beginning. Now, like I said, that's one exercise you can do for the glutes. Other things that you can do include things like squats, bridges, glute bridges, where you lift your bottom up, hip thrusts, leg press machine. But all of these, you have to look at, do I need to restrict the range of motion? So quite often we don't get our patients to squat all the way down to 90 degrees at the start. We limit them by doing box squats where your bum can't go further than the height of the box or the chair. Or we get them to do bridges where they just go gently up instead of trying to force all the way up and keeping it there. So you've got to go in the position that's comfortable, that doesn't irritate the tendons. Then you want to start with low load, so very easy to do, and eventually work your way up to high load, quite heavy. But what you work towards will depend on your goals. So the program we prescribe for somebody who just likes walking or gardening is pretty different from somebody who wants to run, and especially if they want to run a lot, like marathons or fast running. Then we have to work them up to quite a high level with the strength training. Otherwise, they're just not going to be strong enough by the time that they go back to running. The other important thing here is about how often you do these exercises. Now, you will see on the internet that people say, oh, you've got to do your isometrics every single day. You can do them several times a day. That is true for some people. But I've had quite a few people where actually that flares them up, especially I find if women who's in the menopause or just in that phase, the perimenopause, moving up to it. Because the menopause affects how quickly your body can recover from exercise and produce more collagen fibers, which is the main building blocks of the tendons. And in those cases, often we've got to put a few rest days in between those training sessions. Now, if you've moved on from isometrics and you're starting to use weights for your exercises, then maximum 3 times a week, and you need at least 1 rest day in between. But it may even be that you need 2 rest days in between. It depends on different people's bodies recover differently. If you're going on to heavy strength training, so we're thinking of using weights where you can only complete about 8 or 10 repetitions of a movement with that weight, then twice a week is more than enough because you need more recovery days in between. And that also counts if you're also doing other sports that loads your tendons already, like running or jumping sports. Then again, you're going to have to look at where in your week you place your strength training that you don't end up overloading the tendons. Because remember, it's the total load in a session that counts. So if you're running on that day and you're doing strength training, both of those things counts to the load that that tendon can do in that day. So it may be that you're overloaded in that way. So there's plenty of things to think about, but hopefully you found that useful. If you've got any questions, let us know. And if you need more help with your injury, you're welcome to consult one of the team via video call. Link to the website is in the description of this video. Take care.